on our M3 YouTube channel so that we'll be piping you around the world, Nick. People might have some questions.
Wow. Very good. Very good.
And then we can, if anybody wants to watch this again, they certainly can by going to our M3 Center YouTube channel, and you'll see it listed there. Okay, so Group B, and I do have an announcement to make. It's a pretty cool announcement, actually. Things are really picking up, certainly in Sarasota, I think Tampa too. And so we've got 2 hotels that have called me this week. They're both on our board of advisors, and we try to take care of them as best we can. One of them is the Westin, and the Westin has several openings right now. He needs people like tout de suite, right away. So the name of the guy to see is Gil, G-I-L, Reyes, R-E-Y-E-S. He's the GM. Just go right to him. It's good. Gil Reyes. He's got several positions. Some of them are temporary. They'll be for 10 weeks, but you know, it's a pretty cool deal. So go to Gil and you tell him you're from my class. Okay. I don't know exactly which positions. They're not nothing strenuous. A lot of it is like greeters and stuff like that, you know. And then the other contact I had was yesterday from the Hyatt here in Sarasota. So it's the Hyatt on the waterfront in Sarasota. And they have several positions open, and there you go to the HR person, okay? And then, you know, sometimes I put these things in the announcements. I don't know if you look at them or not, but and if any of them send me more information on the announcements, I'll certainly put it in there. But because I always tell them, you know, send me stuff I can publish there. Of course, they want me to write all the things. I'm not your HR department. You know, you write it and I'll send it. So. And the reason I put it on Canvas is because I know you'll read that. I know we hear from you, you're getting bombarded with emails from the university that you click and delete. We know what you're doing. But when you see something come from one of the professors on Canvas, you think it might have something to do with homework or your grade. We got it. So I try not to abuse that too much because I do want you to read my emails because I care, okay? All right, now for the important stuff. I want to introduce Nick. And Nick, say your last name one more time.
Vojnovic, don't worry, it's not phonetic. Vojnovic, yeah.
Yeah. See, and I always want to say Vojnovic, but it's not.
And that is kind of the phonetic. Now, there was a senator from Ohio, and he actually spelled it Voinovitch. And so we are related after we passed. But
oh yeah, he was a great guy. Yeah, yeah, and I know that I in the Slavic languages is always pronounced ch. Right, it's soft C.
Yeah, and that means son of. So like Jovanovic, Jovan is John, that's Johnson, and Petrovich Peterson, Vojnovic, our relatives were the border patrol, so warrior. So it's the son of a warrior.
I like it, Nick.
Yeah, how about that, huh?
Great. Well, I met Nick a couple of years ago now.
Long time.
I met Nick at he's on the board of advisors for the MUMA College of Business. And so Dean Moyes introduced me to Nick there a couple of years ago, and we really hit it off. And one of the reasons is we both graduated from that other school in the East, from Cornell.
Yeah.
And
second to the Sarasota USF.
That's it, Nick.
Yeah, if you can't get into your program, your backup school is Cornell University.
Yeah, but the weather's a lot better here, though.
That's right.
And then we discovered Nick and I come from the same part of New York State. Have been in the same part of New York State also. I was raised partially in Elmira, New York, and he spent some time in Corning, I think, didn't you, Nick?
Yep, Corning. Yep.
And the glass company, it's great. And he owns these little Greek restaurants. Well, it's not just that he owns some of the restaurants, but he owns the franchise that licenses the restaurants. And he'll tell you about his pathways today. And you've all done your research on him. Really like the job most of you did on your research. Did a good job. And Jade Cashmore, I just have to tell you, Jade, can you hear me? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What is your dog's name?
Waco.
I have a poodle who's the same color and does the same thing. They're needy dogs.
He never leaves my lap. Anytime I'm on my laptop, he's here.
So, welcome, Waco. We like having you in class today. All right, Nick, take it away, bud, and let me know when you want me to turn on the slides. Okay?
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks. I'm honored to be here with you all, and thanks for taking some time for your busy schedules to kind of sit in, and hopefully we'll get a few little tidbits of information to you. I do want to give a little plug that just the employment market is so tight right now that I've bought in, and we're starting a new franchise concept called Green Market Cafe. Bowls, wraps, salads, brown rice, blueberries, strawberries. We have a store we're trying to open in Largo, and we have to delay the opening because we can't find staff. So that's how tight the labor market is now. Some operators would argue that part of it is that these enhanced unemployment benefits, there's a lot of folks who can sit at home and make $600 a week. Why go to work? Which that could be the case. So anyhow, that's a little sidebar for if any of y'all students are, if you know anybody up in the Largo, like kind of St. Pete area, we do need people, and please go through Pat, and we'd love to just, even if they can just help us for a few weeks to open up the restaurant. It's in an area called Seminole City Center. So nice little shopping center.
That's what kind of positions you looking for, Nick?
All staff, kitchen, servers.
Okay.
It's a fast casual concept, healthy foods. So it's one of those kind of like a Panera Bread. You come in, you place your order, they prepare the food and bring it out a few minutes later.
Got it. Good. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Go ahead and let's kind of, and also too for the I guess Group B has to ask questions. Is that the deal?
They have to ask questions. A lot of them will anyway, but.
Good. Well, I've made it very easy. At the end of my presentation, I kind of have a disguised 20 top career mistakes. And Group B, you can kind of go through there, and if any of them look interesting, we can start there. So don't feel any pressure that you have to kind of come up with a very clever question. I've already kind of set you up for success on that one. All right. Well, Pat, let's go ahead and kind of go through the slideshow, and we'll kind of bounce back and forth.
Enough.
And then certainly students, if you want, how do they flag a question? Will they just kind of raise their hand, or
just raise their hand?
It's kind of interactive deal. So
just turn on their mic, and I can turn on the chat, but we don't use the chat too much in this class. So we like the live, the live deal. And now who will use the chat are the people in other parts of the world if they're looking, and then Damla will. Damla, you still here? Yeah, I see you have Faizan's picture. You're here.
Yes.
And there we go.
All right, so go ahead and start the slides, Pat.
Yep, I'm getting there.
There you go. There you go. That was a picture of me when I had hair, which is probably now 10 years old. So I guess we probably need to update that. So thanks for having me here. Go ahead, next slide. All right, so my beginning. Basically, my family, and we'll kind of cover a little bit more, is my mom's family was restaurant operators in Belgrade, Serbia, or Yugoslavia. Around World War II, the Germans came in and took over the restaurants and hotels, but they let them kind of keep the money coming through. And then sadly, my mom said when the communists took over, that's where they were kicked out of their house, kicked out of the restaurants, and basically had to live share space like in a warehouse. And so my dad was very fortunate to get a last-minute scholarship to go to Cornell University for a master's degree. Somebody turned it down on a Friday, and they said, "Steve, if you want to go, you have to leave Monday." And my mom was pregnant at the time. So my dad went to Cornell, and kind of the rest of the story is going to kind of go in from there. But I was the first one in my family born in Corning, in the United States. So I'm a first generation. My older brother is actually born in Belgrade, and that's a picture of my grandfather's restaurant on the screen there on the right side. So ultimately, I went to Cornell because I heard Pat was there, and it's such a great school. But really, growing up, the three boys, we all had Cornell bibs and T-shirts, and basically, I only applied to Cornell and University of Pittsburgh. All three boys did go to Cornell. One of the kind of funny stories is my mom had three boys and didn't want any of her boys to marry Catholic girls or be in the restaurant business. All three married Catholic girls, all three in the restaurant business. So that's kind of our little story. There's me with my classic Cheerios box on the bottom left. So kind of a happy-go-lucky little guy, kind of always running around crazy as well. So go ahead, next slide. So basically, going to Cornell, great experience. I was working 2 or 3 jobs while I was there. I was president of my fraternity, resident advisor. I worked at Cornell Dining, and I was a very social guy, a good interviewer. So I had a record 11 job offers when I graduated. I had 5 from hotels, 5 from restaurants, and 1 from a consulting firm, which I was just talking to Pat about. Is some Cornell guys had C.D. Little or C.D. Grissom and Associates, which basically their specialty was kitchen design for big hotels, casinos, all over the world. And they set up a little consulting division because sometimes their clients would need help. So one of the things I learned early on was that one of my first mistakes was when you do a job, try to pick a job that fits your personality. So I had 5 restaurant jobs, 5 hotel, and 1 consulting. Oh, I'm 20 years old. I'll be a consultant. Well, I was a pretty clueless guy. I had no idea. And really, basically, what I found was in the consulting firm, I was the guy who had to write all the reports. I am not a good guy to sit in an office with no windows and just crank out reports. I'd be over there hanging by the coffee machine, chit-chatting with people. And so one of my first lessons learned was that to be successful in life, you got to kind of know who you are. And one of the things I found out was that I am not a number crunching detail guy. I'm more of a front of the house, talk to customers, social guy. So ultimately, I did the consulting for about 2 years and then made a move over into restaurant operations. Next problem I ran into was that one of my second career mistakes was when you get advice, try to get advice from multiple people that kind of know what they're doing. Early in my career, my older brother, who was my hero, who just sadly recently passed away, I would go to him for advice because he was this Mensa brilliant guy. And I'd say, okay, I have the 3 or 4 job offers. Which one should I take? And he'd say, well, take the one that pays the most money, which kind of makes sense. But one of the things I was thinking about was one of my goals, and this is a big plus thing I recommend all of you to do, is early in your career, if you can set a goal, a long-term goal career-wise, it'll make a huge difference in your life. So when I was 20 years old, I wrote down on a piece of paper, my goal is to someday run a restaurant chain. And early on, I remember talking to some people, and some of my buddies went to Yale University, and they asked, what do you want to do? I said, someday I want to run a restaurant chain. I kind of laughed. And he said, why are you laughing? You'll do it. You'll do it. Because if you set a goal and you can start making those conscious decisions to get there. So early in my career, I wasn't really picking the right companies. I was taking the money, but I wasn't getting the good training and understanding of how to run a system. So for instance, if you want to own a hotel or be a general manager of a hotel, Pat mentioned earlier that Hyatt's hiring. Well, Hyatt is a wonderful company, great training program, great systems and procedures, great management. That's kind of how you get there. That's your first step. And most, I find, even when I was at Cornell and all the students, they all want to be VP president like tomorrow. Well, that's just not how it works. You have to know who you are. You have to be able to lead people, and you have to have an understanding of what you're doing. So be prepared. Right now, you all are putting down a foundation for a future career. It's like building a pyramid, and you're laying down those first blocks on the bottom of the pyramid. The bigger and broader that base, the stronger the pyramid will be. So finally, after jumping around for a few years, I kind of got on track and started working for the bigger chains, and started finding how, wow, they have these amazing systems and procedures. They have techniques for how to handle virtually every situation. They had good people and good culture, good operations. So kind of early on, Chili's, and then I became a director of recruiting and training over at Applebee's, went back to Chili's, and that's one other lesson. Never burn bridges. I worked for Chili's, I left on good terms, went to Applebee's, and then Chili's hired me back as a director of recruiting and training because I didn't burn bridges. I left on good terms and always try to, do things the right way. Kind of one of my big breaks was that one of my
Nick, we lost your sound for a minute.
I should have shut my phone off. But so early on, one of my the Chili's chain, we got bought out by the Brinker, the parent company, and the president of our division went up and became president of Famous Dave's, and that was my first kind of senior VP slot. So that was a big slot for me. Was vice president of human resources for Famous Dave's. They have 150 kind of blues and barbecue units out of Minneapolis. I think they had one down in Fort Myers. So basically, early in my career was kind of operations. Let's go to the next slide, Pat. Okay, so next step was in life. What you find is, a big part of life is your family. So I just want to kind of walk you through. My wife, Renee, my kids, Lauren and John are in the middle, and then Zach is Lauren's husband to the left, and then Brittany is John's wife. And then just very exciting was just January 1st, little baby grandbaby Evelyn, our first grandchild, was born. So those in life, those are kind of the big things, is as you go through your path and you all have a wonderful opportunity with the internet and social media to keep in touch with good friends and keep close. When I was growing up, somebody moved away, if you didn't have their address, you would lose track of them. So, one of the things I'd like to really talk about is how important your family is in life. So next slide, please. So my big break career-wise was in 1998. Again, not burning bridges. When I went up to Minneapolis with Famous Dave's, that company had raised about $30 million, $40 million on IPO, initial public offering. And we were burning $1 million a month. Burning means you're more expenses than revenue. We had hired like 8 vice presidents, and I was the VP of Human Resources and Training. And ultimately, we were opening restaurants very rapidly, but we were kind of running out of cash. So we had to start laying off executives. And fortunately, the guys who I'd worked with at Chili's down here in Tampa, they had purchased a small franchise called O Bradys. It was started in Brandon, Florida, kind of a little hole in a wall. A guy named Jim Melody kind of created this concept: no hard liquor, beer and wine, chicken wings, burgers, sandwiches. But early in those days, like in the 80s, they had satellites. So believe it or not, kids, a long time ago, you couldn't catch every single football game in the world on Sunday with Red Zone. You would only pick up maybe 1 or 2 local broadcasts. So if you wanted to go see the Buffalo Bills play the New York Giants, you had to go to see somewhere that they had a satellite dish that would pick up the game. And early on, you had to kind of call around, and they had to try to find the coordinates for the feeds. So Beef O'Brady's really had a great run. We bought it. There are 30 locations. And that was my big break, is also Chuck Winship, the CEO, was nice enough to let me buy it as a 10% partner over my 12-year career. And we grew that company from 30 locations, doing about $16 million in sales, or 18, I'm sorry, to 270 locations doing $250 million in sales. So it was a great run, but I made tons of mistakes. And we grew too fast, and the store expenses kept going up. So the investment was getting higher and higher. The rents were going up. I don't know if you guys remember back in the early 2000s, it was a boom like it's going to be now. I think we're having a boom right now. And rents went way up. The construction costs went way up. So in 07, 08, when that market crashed and people stopped going out, I don't know if you remember the housing market, everything just ground to a halt, and sales dropped 20%. We were at one point 270 stores, and when I left, it was like 250. The stores were starting to close. So another lesson learned was to watch your financial model on any business and your personal life. Don't have too much debt. Try to be really cautious. Always save for the rainy day. Always watch out for that kind of hidden, like this vaccine situation. I'll walk you through later, but Little Greek was well prepared for something like this. I never had any idea. Every year you sit down and you plan your year and kind of, okay, we're going to grow. We're going to open maybe 10% more restaurants. Our revenues will go up maybe 15% as sales go up. What if we have an economic crash of 10, 15%? Is my company okay? I say, well, yes. But when that, when COVID hit in March, we waived royalties. So our revenues went to zero. And fortunately, we are the franchisor, we could handle it. But that was a tough hit, and a lot of companies they went under. They couldn't keep alive. So nobody really planned for a COVID type situation, and it's extreme. And even me, unfortunately, I'm quite the optimist. I would never have predicted that this would last for 12 months. So it's been a brutal deal. But back with Beef O'Brady's, a great run. One of the other lessons I learned is when you only own 10%, you don't control what's going on around you. So in 06, 07. The chairman and CEO were 40% each, and the chairman decided he wanted to sell. So they put the company on the market. We had 100 companies interested, 7 finalists, and we bought the company for $2 million. We sold it for $24 million. So here am I, who was all my blood, sweat, and tears in this franchise company, and knowing all the franchisees and their kids and their backgrounds. All of a sudden, I'm on the street. And that's a tough one. And in life, you'll have your ups and downs, and just be prepared. It's life is not a straight, line up. You're going to have ups and downs in life, and you have to be prepared. You have to kind of plan for the rainy day, kind of have your kind of hedge your bets. So whenever they bought us out, they put a new CEO in at Beef O'Brady's, and I had a 1-year severance, fortunately. And one of my goals, remember I talked earlier, I'd like you all today, if you can, to, I guess you won't write it on a piece of paper, you don't do that anymore, but somewhere in your phone is make a list and write down 10 goals of things you want to do in life: career, personal, financial, spiritual, physical. Write those goals down. It's really, it'll change your life. And I'll give you, for instance, this is not a life-changing event, but one of the things I put down in my goals, obviously, was to get my master's degree. And so here's my chance. I've always wanted to get a master's degree. Well, when you have 2 kids in the house and payments, you can't just stop what you're doing and get a master's degree. Now, I guess some people can do night school, which is actually not a bad deal. And I presume some of you probably, it sounds like you're already working now and doing this at the same time. But for me, one of my goals always was to get a master's degree. And so here's my chance. And so fortunately, I was guided over to go to the University of South Florida Business School. They have an executive MBA program, which is really geared for business people, kind of people that have been in the industry for 10, 15, 20 years. And it's you go like a full all day Friday, all day Saturday, and then all day Saturday. So it's 3 days a month. But then they kind of load you up on a lot of work and a lot of team projects on the work side. But for me, it was just a wonderful experience. Met some great people. My class was comprised, I was the only unemployed person in my class. It was mostly doctors, engineers, TICO, bankers, lawyers. So it was a great mix of people to kind of give you an overview of what's going on out there. So so that's kind of was kind of a good opportunity. And while I was in school, that's where I realized, okay, my strength is growing small franchise companies and making it bigger. I actually did not like O Bradys as much when we got up to around $250 million in sales, because then we had 50 corporate staff and they said, Nick, you can't go talk to the franchisee. You got to go through the VP of operations, COO, and then they got to go through the field consultant. It just gets very kind of siloed. So while I was at school, I said, I'm going to try to buy. And also I wanted to be over a 50% owner. I did not want to be the 10% partner who all of a sudden somebody decides they want to sell and I'm on the street. So another lesson in life is if some of you are entrepreneurs, want to open your own business, try to be in control. If you don't own over 50% or don't have in your operating agreement the ability to make decisions, you can be put in a very bad spot. So the thing is that when I was looking, I didn't have, I ultimately, when we cashed in beefs, I owned 10%. So it was like $2.4 million. But when you hear somebody makes all that money, they don't put all that in their pocket. You got to pay taxes, which was around $500,000 or $600,000. I had borrowed money to buy stock, and that was another couple $100,000. And so by the time it kind of gets down, you're not like sitting on this big $2.4 million. So I was trying to look for a smaller company, and ultimately I was very fortunate. One of my contacts set me up with Little Greek, which, in life too, when we sold O Bradys, I was crushed. But it turns out it was a blessing because it gave me an opportunity to be a majority partner and buy and do Little Greek and really kind of learn my stuff. So let's see what the next slide holds here, Pat.
Yep.
Oh, there's my USF. Look at me. I was actually the poster boy for USF. They had me in some of their TV commercials and stuff. And I was fortunate on the USF thing I was the token student on the Dean Search Committee. And so it was kind of a neat story is there's like 15 big shot executives and I was the student. They bring it as a very high powered search firm. And they get paid, I think, $100,000 or $150,000 to find people like Pat. And the search goes on. And they bring in these 2 candidates. And in academia, they got this little quandary. They want people that are very strong academic and they have the writing skills, they've been published, but then also, they have to be able to raise money. And so they have to have the ability to connect with business crowd and all that. Well, the 2 finalists, one of them was very strong academic, not strong on the, doing the business community stuff. And the other one was strong on the business community stuff, but not very strong academic. So it's kind of a gutsy move, but we basically told them, we need to go back to the search. Neither of these candidates, and this was after months of interviews and winnowing down this group. And so luckily, the next candidate coming in was Moez Lemoyne. He is amazing. He does have that, like Pat, that rare ability to have the academics, but also understands business and the people side and can connect with the community and really a great leader. And so that was really a wonderful experience. And so my thing was, and sadly with this virtual, you might lose a lot of for me, going back to college, I didn't really need a master's degree, but I think 1/3 of my master's experience was what I learned, kind of refreshing and learning new things. I sadly, when I was executive, So at Beef O'Brady's, I started there at 88, and even at Famous Dave's, you had assistants. So if I needed a PowerPoint, I'd say, okay, here's the slides I want. If I needed Excel, they would run it for me. So when I went back to business school, I'd have my 13-year-old daughter show me how to do PowerPoint. So that was one of the kind of the fun learning experiences about when you get older. And you guys are laughing now, but someday you'll look back when whatever there's this mind reading technology that you're gonna ask your kid to show you how to do, because that just has kind of escaped you. So you'll chuckle in 30 years from now when you guys are all older like me, and you'll think back to how whatever technology at that point is raced by. But for me, so 1/3 was what I learned in class. Another third was the students, and getting to, the ability to network, and even your class here, your group of students is really self-selected. These will be the leaders in the industry down the road. So my classmates in Cornell were executives at Arby's and all of these different companies that they're running. And it really is a wonderful resource as you go to get good advice, business connections, get hired, find deals. One of my classmates was one of my franchisees for Beef O'Brady's with Little Greek in Dallas. And so these are some things where if you can, and it's hard, with virtual, you kind of lose it, but your classmates are a great resource. And I really encourage you to keep in touch. The final third of the education piece was the faculty and the administration, which is a little harder for you now, but like people like Pat are a tremendous resource for guidance, connections, and information. And you should never let that go. You all should be calling him 5 years from now when you have a little, sometimes in your career, you get these little, fork in the road kind of moments. And my take there would be, going back earlier when I was go to my brother for advice, is you want to get advice from multiple people. Call me. Say, hey, I love that guy, Nick. Let me just see what he thinks. Get advice from multiple people. But then ultimately, I'm going to only give you advice from my perspective. I remember when I was first looking for a concept, I went and talked to Ed Drosky. He was the founder of Hooters. And I said, Ed, I'm looking at some concepts. I got this Little Greek. We had lunch there. Food was wonderful. And Ed, who started Hooters, was, okay, Nick, here's what you got to do. You got to come up with a really catchy, kind of a funny, edgy logo. And then you got to do T-shirts, and you got to have employees wearing tight clothes. And so Ed's trying to give me the best advice he could, but that was advice that made Hooters a success, not Little Greek. So as you're getting advice from people, you got to realize they're trying to be helpful, but they're going to give you unconsciously their own biases and their own experiences. So as you get advice, I say get it from multiple people, and I have different people for different types of advice. So sometimes I have some buddies who are really good at franchising questions. Some people are better at restaurant operations questions. Some people I call for leasing, personal. So try to have like a kind of a board, like Pat was talking to me before we got on. He's building an advisory board for the hospitality program, and he's trying to get a good mix of people. That's kind of what you need to have in life. Who are the people you call to give advice about buying a house? I had no clue. Doing a lease, I had no clue. There, try to find people that you go to. Use me. Use that. These are the resources. That's the final third.
Nick, we lost your sound again. There you go.
Yeah, so I got calls from you guys. I apologize. I hope that that you can build those connections still, that you have resources, and even when you work in places, don't be afraid to ask people for advice. I mean, it's always you got to kind of take it a little bit. I wouldn't say grain of salt, but you want to kind of they're trying to be helpful, but they're just giving it from their perspective. So my MUMA experience was really, I really enjoyed it. And since then, I've always been very involved with the university. I'm always mentoring 4 or 5 students. Right now, I have a young guy we're meeting this afternoon. He is getting his master's. He was a restaurant nightclub guy down in Brazil. And so we're gonna. He said, I want to meet some local restaurateurs. I said, well, come on up. We're going to be looking at a site, and you can meet our broker, and we'll kind of go from there. So, I lose you again. I apologize, Pat. I should have shut the phone.
No, you're okay now.
Yeah. Okay. So anyhow, so that's kind of the name of the game, is just getting great advice, and MUMA has been wonderful, and I'm on the board, and we have the president of the Lightning is on the board, and he actually came and spoke to our franchise meeting. It's just such nice people. It's a great group of folks, and so I advise you in life to get your own advisory board as well. All right, let's go next slide.
Yeah, and before we do that, Nick, I just wanted to share with the students that a story you told me before class started, that when you were getting your MBA, one of the people in your class was Cassie Johnson, who was also a speaker in this class a few weeks ago. So it's an interconnected world.
Yeah. And Cassie, she's brilliant. It really is. And so, please, as again, I'm super social off the charts. So that's kind of part of the who I am. And some people are very quiet and low key, and I get that too. So, it's hard, but so maybe you can find your own way to build your board too. So back then, 2011, I'm in school. I'm the only unemployed student. I'm also, I think, the second oldest student in the class. I finally, one of my buddies, whenever we sold beasts, he said, Nick, you're going to need to look at 100 deals before you find the deal you like. And I said, come on, you're crazy. I know so many people, I'll find it. Well, actually, I ended up looking at 80 different deals before I found Little Greek, which was through a friend of mine, networking, Paul Sampson. He owned West Shore Pizza, Lenny and Vinny's. Now he does Holy Hog, and he's doing Black Rock Steakhouse. And he was one of my advisors, and he kept telling me, one of my clients is this Little Greek. You should go check it out. This super busy place. And I kind of like Greek because I was thinking, well, there's no major player. It's not like a Panera Bread blocking you or Five Guys in the burger segment. Nobody's really doing a whole Greek Mediterranean. And there was a local gal named Sigrid Bradys. She was from Estonia, and she had built it up to 4 locations, two that she owned and 2 were franchised, but kind of realized that she couldn't take it to the next level. And so I met with Sigrid, and we kind of got the thing, we kind of got it growing. And actually, it's a typo there. When I came on board, 4 stores were doing about $2 million in sales. And now we got 44 locations doing 33 million. And one of the mistakes we made at Beast was growing too fast, say 50 stores a year. So with Little Greek, I've switched up, and we're only doing maybe 3 or 4. Last year, we just did 1 because of COVID, but try to do steadier growth. The other thing is, instead of like Beef O Bradys spending $400,000 or $500,000, $600,000, and these guys were borrowing $400,000, $500,000 through the SBA, and then having to pay every month $4,000 or $5,000 in a mortgage payment, I would say let's go for shutdown restaurants, and let's keep our investment below 150. So people were going in all cash, and that's a huge advantage. And certainly that played in with COVID. When sales dropped, most of our people were owner operators, so they were pulling the salaries from themselves. They had to sometimes trim back the crew, but they didn't have this big mortgage hanging over. And we really had no stores closed because of COVID. We had one gal who was 8 years in. Her lease was up for renewal, and she had some health issues in Texas. We had another gentleman in Lakeland who just it was too far away from him, from Tampa, and he just sold it to another concept. But we were very fortunate going through COVID. Our sales dropped dramatically, like 30% that first month. We waived royalties. So we went from bringing in maybe $120,000, $130,000 a month in royalties to 0. Now, PPP ultimately kind of filled that gap later, but I basically told all the shareholders, no distributions. We're going to keep our salary set. Let's cut back all expenses. And the franchisees, we started selling, I don't know if you remember, we were selling groceries. I mean, I said, anything you do to bring money in, keep your doors open, do it. Do not close your restaurants. Once you close, it's very difficult, very expensive to get back. And so, and then up in of all of our 44 restaurants, I own one. It's by the University of South Florida, and of all those restaurants, that was the store that got hit the hardest because we relied heavily on USF for catering and just all the business. And that store, even today, is still down 50%. During COVID, our sales went from doing maybe 55,000 a month. We were going doing 10,000 a month. So what I did was I said, well, I kept my staff on full pay, kept everybody going. And I said, well, just start cleaning and do what you can. And I thought, you know what? I got these people. Let's give back. So I called Feeding Tampa Bay, and they hooked us up with Hillsbury Hope's, the homeless camp. And we started doing 100 hot meals a night, 3 nights a week. And then also I called USF, and there's a food pantry at USF up in Tampa. And I heard that the international students all got stuck here because they couldn't get flights to go back home, and the food pantry was running out of food. So I set up all the food pantry students on a list, and I said, come by the restaurant twice a week and we'll give you a meal. And so we ultimately donated and served several thousand meals. And we also were partnering with some other folks to do meals to first responders and hospitals and things like that. And then sadly, my brother and I were over on the East Coast watching the SpaceX launch. Was that SpaceX? Yeah, the launch. And I don't know if you remember, back in Tampa, my wife calls and said, honey, I got bad news. They're rioting over at University Square Mall, and they're starting to light buildings on fire. And I go, that's, our restaurant's right next to that area. And I go, well, that's not a good sign. But I said, well, you know what? There's nothing I can do about it. I said, Renee, I said, tell everybody to stay away. It's not worth going in there and trying to protect the store. And the next morning, I have like 15 emails, texts, and calls, and the Ring cameras were just blowing up. And sadly, some folks broke in and stole money and they didn't destroy the restaurant, but they smashed a bunch of stuff. And so here we were feeding, hundreds of meals a week, donating, and we had to call these people and just say, we have to throw all the food away. We're not going to be able to take care of you for a while until we get open again. So that was kind of the, it was kind of like we've had COVID was bad enough. And then I said, well, it can't get any worse than that. Well, it got worse. So again, in life, be prepared and be resilient for those tough days. But then, you know what? They did the PPP loans. We got money. Now we're on a skeletal staff. We got another round of money. So things happen. And sometimes in life, you'll hit the wall and you have to kind of regroup and start over again. But just try to realize that there are better days ahead. Keep your chin up and keep moving forward. So for me, the whole Little Greek experience has been wonderful. I brought in a good team. And I have a gentleman, Brian St. George, who worked for me before at O Bradys. He's my chief operating officer, and he does a wonderful job of kind of taking care of all the nitty gritty nuts and bolts things. And then I get to do stuff like this to get to talk to you all and have fun and have lunch with business partners and stuff like that. So Little Greek has been a wonderful experience. It's really has been a great story for me. And it's been a great learning experience. And that's one of the things I do like to tell you is one of my values, and I think we'll cover here shortly, though, is always be learning, always to grow, always be trying to find out new things and keep your mind fresh and keep learning from your experiences. And so that's why going back to get my master's, doing Little Greek, and then now even doing a new venture, Green Market Cafe, has really been kind of fun for me and exciting opportunities. So let's see what the next slide holds, Pat. Oh, wow. Oh, crap. So in life, you will have these curveballs. And I told my kids sometimes, when things are going real well, just appreciate how good things are, because there will be some bad days. And so years ago, actually, probably around year 2000, we were doing a fundraiser for a little boy who had leukemia at O Bradys. And one of the general managers, owners said, hey, Nick, why don't you do a cheek swab at Be the Match? Maybe you can help save this kid. I said, of course. So I do the cheek swab and don't think anything of it. Well, a couple of years later, they sent me a note and said, hey, you are a match for a person who has leukemia. Would you be interested in doing a bone marrow donation? I said, of course. So they have you go through a second round of blood tests. And then they call me back and say, we're so sorry, we can't use you. And I said, what do you mean? I'm healthy as an ox. I've never been in a hospital a day in my life. Well, something's wrong with your blood. And I went to my primary care doctor and they said, this is weird. We would only give you this test if you had a heart attack, because this test measures the number of damaged or dead red blood cells in your system, and yours is elevated. But at that point, my bone marrow was keeping up. He said, well, your numbers are fine. So, maybe it's just a chronic, like a disease or something like that your body kind of compensates for. And we had a hematologist. He kind of said, that's probably the case. Well, fast forward, probably 10 years later, and I go to my primary care doctor and they said, this is not good. Your red blood count should be 11. They do HGB hemoglobin, actually 11, and now it's 10.5. Well, maybe it's just a little quirk. Let's just see. We'll have you come back a year later. We'll see where we're at. Well, I come back a year later, it's 10. And then this is not good. And it's never good when you get set up on an appointment with an oncologist. An oncologist is a cancer doctor. So I go to the oncologist and they do what's called a bone marrow biopsy. They take almost like a corkscrew, like from a wine opener, and they drill it into your hip bone. They do local sedation. But this gal was pretty tiny, and I'm a big guy. And later on, you learn that myelofibrosis actually deposits calcium into your bone marrow, so your bones get super strong. But then your bone marrow keeps shrinking. That's why the blood counts go down. She was having problems drilling in. In fact, she couldn't even get, your bone marrow is real spongy, soft. She couldn't even get, they call it a dry tap. She couldn't even get bone marrow out. So I think she immediately knew something was wrong because she had worked at Moffitt Cancer Center, but she didn't say anything. So she said, come back in 30 days, we'll give you the results. Well, I walk in the office and she won't even make eye contact. She just kind of looks down and I go, oh, this is not good. And she basically says, Nick, I have bad news. You have myelofibrosis. I said, what is that? So she leaves the office for a moment, comes back with a Google search. It basically says you have 1 to 3 years to live. And I just I'm floored. I didn't even bring my wife to that meeting because my health was perfect. I didn't feel bad at all. So then what happens is your mind explodes, and you wake up at night, 3 a.m, you look at yourself in the mirror, you go back, you're like, well, how in the world does this happen to me? I have 1 to 3 years to live. So I flew all over the country, met all the top doctors, Mayo Clinic, Hutchinson Clinic, MD Anderson, Houston, and basically all said the same thing, that you have 1 to 3 years to live. Your bone marrow is going to slowly keep crying. Your red counts will go down. We give you transfusions for a while, but at some point your transfusions just wear out. There's only one, and I guess they call it a cure. It's called a stem cell transplant. And basically what that entails, it's extremely risky, 60-40 2-year survival. So 60% live, 40% die. A certain percentage of the ones who live are miserable because their body has this thing called graft versus host. But it's your only way out. But the other thing is you have to have a match. Remember that be the match thing? So, oh, well, there's 29 million people in the database. Of course I have a match. Well, they go in the database and I have one match. And it's a 22-year-old female. They don't tell you their name because you have to wait a year to meet your match because they want to make sure you live. So I'm flying back and forth to MD Anderson. I'm doing anything I can to try to postpone the transplant. So I'm on this trial at MD Anderson. I get on a Southwest flight, 5 a.m, fly to Houston, Texas. They would give me some drugs on a trial, and then I'd fly back at 5 o'clock that night. And I'm not really telling anybody because at this point, I don't know how I live. Luckily, my mutation was one of the safer, slower mutations. But one day I'm at MD Anderson, and my disease could turn into acute myeloid leukemia. It's called AML, which is extremely dangerous. And if it does, then my survival goes from 60% down to 20%. And the doctor, they measure this thing called blasts, which are immature white cells. And the doctor looks up at me and says, your blasts have gone from 1 to 5%, time for a transplant. So this is late 2016. Now we have to go see, is my donor still available? What if she's pregnant? What if she's changed her mind? What if she, something's happened to her? Maybe she's sick. So they go back to the database, and luckily this gal said, I'm good to go. We set a date for early December 2016, and I go to the hospital. They start doing all the workups. It is a weird deal because when you do this procedure, it's all chemo. So there's no surgery. So you basically are checking in like a hotel. You have a little carry-on bag, and they're going to put basically they put the equivalent was mustard gas. They found mustard gas kills your bone marrow, and that's how you die. Is your body can't make any white cells, platelets, or red blood cells. But here they kill your bone marrow. 5 days later, they put her bone marrow into your system, and somehow a miracle, it finds its way into the bone marrow, and slowly your cells blood cells start regenerating. So I go in and I have a little sniffle. And so they're doing all these tests. They're looking at everything, blood pressure, they're checking everything out. And finally, before they kind of hooked me up in these 2 big chemo bags. And they said, anything else you want to say? Well, I've had a sniffle. Well, did anybody do the nasal swab? I said, no. And they go, do it right away. And the lady says, well, the lab's closed. We can't get results. She said, you get these results right away. Turns out I had a rhinovirus, it's just a regular flu. And I said, what does that mean? He said, well, that means your chance of survival goes down 3%. I go, wow. I go, 3%. Well, overall, I'm at a 60-40, so that means 57-43, but that's kind of for everybody, and you got to kind of go into like, well, maybe I'm part of that good group. So I go, doc, what should I do? He said, well, it's your decision. And I guess I would ask you students, what would you do? You're all set. The gal's ready to go, and 3% chance of higher mortality. Would you wait and try to reschedule or not? So we finally, nobody would give us an answer at the hospital. And there's a gentleman in scrubs, because what happens when you get a cold, they have to put these yellow gowns on, like hazmat suits. And the guy's kind of cleaning things up or whatever. He goes, I go, what do you think, Jake? He goes, well, you all live close? We said, yeah, we're just, Valrico, 30 minutes away. He goes, I'd go home. So we went home and we kind of rolled the dice. Fortunately, my donor agreed to go forward, and we rescheduled for January 7th. And my rebirth, which is I now have female blood, is January 11th of 2017. And you kind of celebrate that because that's you're reborn. I have female blood, XX chromosomes, and lucky for me, a year later, you get to meet your donor. And I had done a lot of, and I'll ask all of you, please sign up for Be the Match. Please sign up. It's just a cheek swab, and you can save somebody's life. And it's ironically somebody that you're kind of related to. So a year later, they ask, would you like to meet your donor? You've signed up several hundred people for us. I said, sure. They fly her down, and I'm thinking, it's a 10-10 antigen match. Your white blood cells to fight these. I'm thinking, oh, probably Serbian or Greek girl, for like where I'm from. And they flash her name up on the screen. They do this big. There's 3 TV stations there, newspapers. There's like 75 people at the hotel on the beach in Clearwater, and I don't get to meet her until they flash. It's Caroline Gomez. My donor is from Bogota, Colombia. And so I asked the doctor, how in the world does a Serbian guy, both families, all from Yugoslavia, have a match? And she said, Nick, it's a great statement too. At the end of the day, we're all related. And so somehow Caroline Gomez, who lives in Fort Myers, she loved beef O Bradys. Her parents came up from Bogota, Colombia, and she saved my life. And so I go and I'm introducing myself. We're crying, and I meet her boyfriend, and I talk to her boyfriend. Well, where do you go to school? Thanks for coming down from D.C. Oh, I go to George Washington. He goes, I went to Cornell. He goes, oh, my uncle and my mom went to Cornell, Jim and Emily Garr. I said, well, I'm golfing with your uncle next week, and I know your mom. So I have one match out of 29 million people, and her boyfriend, who's now fiance, I know his family. So life has these weird twists and turns, and I do feel, I don't know how spiritual you guys are, but there's more to life than we know. I mean, it's just so, just such a wild, story. And so, fortunately, it was really brutal process going through the stem cell transplant. Your body, it really gets destroyed and just miserable. There were days where I couldn't eat or drink water. Your throat fills up with sores, but you like anything. I had a guy who was my coach. He had been through it. He said, just take it one day at a time. Just get through that day, and then you wake up in the morning. I got another day. And so that's how life is. Just take it one day at a time. Sometimes you'll see and you'll think these challenges are insurmountable. You can get through it. Just take it one day at a time, keep your chin up and keep moving forward. Even my doctor, who was kind of a negative doctor, she said half of your survival in this deal is having a positive mental attitude. So that's kind of was for me a life-changing event. And you kind of, learn how your family and friends, going back earlier, that's kind of what life's all about, is just really focus on maximizing your relationship with your family and friends. So let's take a look at the next slide. Oh, Green Market Cafe, we talked about that. Initially, my joke was when I was going through my chemo and stuff, hey, I'm not buying green bananas. I'm not sure if I'm going to be around in a few days, so I don't want to make plans. But now, a couple of years out, say, hey, life goes on. And you never know, people with these transplants have lived 20, 30 years. So I just set up a partnership with Green Market Cafe with Andrew Comey, great young businessman. We've got 2 locations, just opened number 3, get reopened number 4, and working on number 5. So that's kind of my thing in life, is keep moving forward, keep doing and keep, what you'll do is, remember I told you, write that list of 10 goals. You will hit those goals, then you reload more or even go beyond 10. So, so that's kind of how it works. Is definitely for me, it's been a fun run. Let's try to see one more slide. My values, passion. I'm always gung-ho, rah-rah guy. Integrity, got to be open and honest. Constantly get better. Operationally excellent, got to really run a good business and then give back. I've donated to you guys. If you ever come to MUMA, there's a Nicholas S. Voynich Little Greek reception area. Pat will, I'll buy you free coffee up there, but give back and help out. I try to do as much as I can on the board for it. And I'm also a big brother. That's my second request for you, is sign up for Be the Match and be a big brother, big sister. I have a young man who's 12 years old. He has no family. They basically said, we have Nick, you can pick, there's either a African-American boy, single mom, or there's a 12-year-old or 11-year-old white boy with no family at all. And so I picked Nick, and I've learned more about life through him. His mother passed away, grandpa passed away. His choice was, you want to live with Miss Ryan from the rec center, and she'll let you stay in the house where your grandmother had, or you can live with Mr. Steve, the pool guy. And so this guy has the best attitude on life. We go out a couple times a month, and just a wonderful thing. So please, if you have time, it's only 2 times a month, 4 hours. I usually do double that, but you can change somebody's life. It doesn't cost a penny, and it'll change your life as well. Be the Match. Be the Match and big brother, big sister. So I'm on their board too. So I try to get very involved and help out as much as I can. Next slide. The kind of summary, which is good. Next slide. Oh, this is a little more little Greek stuff. Next slide. More stuff, little Greek. Keep going. These are some of our clients. Keep going. Keep going. Oh, I left that on my awards. I'm going to be on the board for the hospitality program, Yosef. Community involvement. Keep going. We have rebranded. Keep going. Keep going. Oh, here you go. Top 20 career mistakes. Group B. We're at, look at 1025. Perfect. All right, Group B. Look through this list. They're somewhat disguised. Pick one, and I'll try to remember the story that goes with it. So, Pat, turn it over to them.
All right. And should I leave the slide up?
Yeah, leave the slide up.
Okay. All right. I'll try to maneuver this so you can all do it on your own computer so you can see everybody. So Group B, it's all yours. Hit it. You can ask a question or you can.
Ask a question or give me a number.
Yeah.
Hi, Nick. My name's Analia. Nice to meet you.
Analia, the valedictorian. She was on the call, you guys, 20 minutes early. She is going to be very successful in life. I like. You're a go-getter. You're like Cassie Johnson.
Thank you. That means a lot to hear. I appreciate that. So my question was, and you kind of answered it during your presentation, just about how you grow these concepts so fast. So basically your whole outlook on it is that if you kind of start small and then have a good product and kind of grow gradually is better than, because it's just amazing how you're able to go from a smaller number of stores to such a big number. Yeah, but so thank you for answering that. But I wanted to ask about knowing yourself, Mr. Consultant. That has me curious.
Okay. Well, and I kind of touched on that too, but let me step back a little bit on the one thing. Did you notice I never create concepts? I always come in on a concept that I feel has already been proven, and my strength is growing it. So I will tell you, be careful when you create a concept because sometimes there's inherent flaws that you've not seen yet. So I always pick concepts that have been around for a couple of years and they're kind of proven, the sales are there, and then the unit economic model. How much does it cost and what kind of return? So on the knowing yourself, it kind of goes back to, remember me picking the consulting job, and I'm not a kind of guy who can sit in the office and write a report, talking to customers. And so my career really didn't take off until I got into franchising because I'm a sales guy. That's my strength, is connecting people, putting deals together. And so that's kind of where you have to know who you are. And I have to, other part was, which is one of these also, is I have to realize where I'm weak, and then I hire people that are strong where I'm weak. For instance, my first hire at Little Greek was Jennifer Bujalski, super detailed. She put this deck together. She would take notes or meetings. Okay, here's what we have to do. And so as you go out in life, if you're trying to do things, try to build a team around you of people that fill in your gaps. And then sometimes, like, there's another story which I'll cover already, is my initial thing at Beast, I hired all people like me. We had a wonderful time. We were talking and having a great time. We never got anything done because I hired all the people that are really outgoing. So kind of know yourself. Sometimes those psychological tests, I like those. They kind of give you a good sense and they help you kind of who you are.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Analia. Next.
Oh, and sorry, Dr. Mario, I do have to go because I have to go.
I got your text message. Right.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I go now?
Yeah, go ahead, Travis.
I'm just going to start by saying that's a great story you had, and I'm definitely going to look into that, be the match.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. Really, it's amazing. It's really easy. You literally save somebody's life. I have a friend right now. There's a guy named Ron Campbell. He was president of Lightning. He has no matches. And can you imagine how sad that is? Where that hopefully that you could be the one who gets in there. So please, it's just a cheek swab, and they like young DNA. They kind of cut you off at age 44 because your DNA starts unraveling. So thank you very much.
And then I'm going to go with number 14, doing business with new vendors.
Okay, so here's where we've gotten burned a lot is what happens with every day I have all these technology firms calling me up, and there's one called Level Up. And early on, they give you a really good deal. The Level Up is a loyalty program. And so, okay, we'll sign up. All right, well, by the way, you got to do $10,000 to get the your app set up. Okay, $10,000. So you set up, it's $49 a month. Well, over every year, which is really cheap for that program. Well, every year they bump it up more and more. So now it's $149 a month. And there was a software glitch where the loyalty program, somebody figured out a loophole, and they were getting free food. And instead of the company backing up our franchisee, they said, well, you're too bad. It's your fault. So one of the things I say is be careful when you have a business of any kind, even as you guys are out getting insurance or buying products, try to talk to your friends and get referrals that, hey, I've had a good experience with this company or these people before. Because sometimes you go like for instance, somebody doing a roof and the guy was clueless and it ended up costing me more money to fix what he messed up not because I didn't ask around and get referrals from people that I know and respect to help out. So that's kind of the thing with these vendors, is just be very careful. Because for instance, my brother's company he has a brokerage firm, and one of the employees wants to get a new CRM. It's called Customer Relationship Management. And I said, well, make sure you go through all the questions. You go, oh, it's only $250 a month. Well, but what about how do you migrate all their our data into their database? Oh, that's $10,000. Well, they don't tell you that until you sign. And these guys, they'll make you sign a contract, and they won't let you out. You sign a contract, and if you want to get out, we have people. There's a linen company called Cintas, and we have a preferred contract with UniFirst. And UniFirst, you give them 30 days, you're out. Well, Cintas, they sneak in. Sometimes they'll have your employees sign the linen agreement. You cannot get out. Well, if you want to get out, you sign a 3-year deal. You got to pay us $5,000. So be really careful if you ever in business and in life. Just definitely as you sign these leases, be careful. Those are you're locked in. And like I remember signing my first lease, and you don't realize, but there's a thing called a personal guarantee on a lease for business. If it's 5 years and you decide after year 2 it's not working, they can come after you for the final 3 years of the lease. Now they normally don't go for all whatever 150,000, but they'll go after you for more money if you have it. So personal guarantees, be very careful, and that's what's on this list as well. Be very careful about personal guarantees. Thank you, Travis. Is that good?
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Travis. Yeah. Who's next?
I'll go next. Oh,
Was that Rachel?
yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
So, hi, Nick. I just have a question. It's going along with one of yours, because I'm always really interested in like working with the team. Like I love working with teams and being successful in that. So let's go with the number 2 with the building a team and coffee time, because I'm curious about that.
Yeah. I kind of touched on that briefly too, where, I'm what they call high I. If you look at a disc profile, the D is dominant, I is influence sales, S is the steady Eddie, and C is the computer kind of very good with numbers. And so that was kind of addressing where with little beef O Bradys is like, for instance, Little Greek, I had to hire Brian St. George. He's my bad cop because I'm a nice guy. I want everybody to like me. And so with franchisees, oh, we'll want to do this, we'll want to do that. Well, at Beef O Bradys, I had Scott Taylor. He now runs this concept called, with Drew Brees as his partner. It's a Cajun Walk-Ons Bistro. They have like 50 units, big national thing. But he was my bad cop. So the key is trying to find like where you're strong, let yourself go there. But if you have weaknesses, try to fill those gaps. And it's kind of like a wheel. They're in life and in running a business, you have these different departments. Human resources has a totally different culture and personality than your accounting department. The marketing people, they're wild and crazy and they're very creative. They're very different than the operations people who are kind of grinding it down. They the operations are everything's black and white. You got to follow all the rules. And so to have a good company, you have to have all these different personalities. And sometimes those personalities will clash. Like for instance, Brian and I will butt heads because I'm trying to be too nice to franchisees and I feel he's trying to be too tough on them. So you have to kind of embrace that clash and realize we are both bringing important stuff to the table. And we need to make sure our decisions reflect that as well. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that for sure. Thank you.
So you seem like a pretty outgoing gal, right? Yeah, and a little bit like, see, you strike me as a little bit, and this is obviously just in 20, but you seem like you're kind of, are you one of those people that can take charge of the situation?
Yeah, I actually like right now I work in events in hotels. So like I'm always like kind of one that's in charge of things like with that. But I always like to learn from everybody else that I'm working with.
And so sometimes you got to realize, but sometimes if you have 2 people like that, it's very difficult because both want to take charge. So as you're hiring your team, you can't have another high D person with you because you're going to be butting heads with them because they're going to disagree. So as you're hiring people, try to fill those gaps. You need a lot of people. If you're high D, you want people that will give you feedback, but also that will kind of take direction and go your way. So that's kind of where, as you kind of go through, and Pat can kind of help you guys try, it is very kind of complex stuff to figure, but it actually comes into relationships as well. One of my faults is I'm non-confrontational. My wife likes confrontation, so we have a kind of a problem because I really struggle with kind of bringing stuff up. So anyhow, that's kind of this affects your personal life as well as business.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Who's next?
Yeah, and before we go to the next person, Nick, I just will underline what you just said. A few weeks ago, students, I forget who it was, but we got on this kind of the same track, and we were talking about Myers-Briggs, and that's one of the exercises you can use to identify the sorts of things Nick's talking about. There's also the color test, which, you know, you're orange or you're green or whatever. It's like 4 colors to tell whether you're outgoing, introverted. But that's the whole point. And I've been in same thing Nick just said, you know, you get 2 people who are introverts and they don't want to talk about anything. All you're going to have is a bunch of rules and no discussion, which it can be a problem, or the opposite too. So thank you, Nick. That was good. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, who's next?
I guess I'll go next.
Juan?
I'm curious about number 13, starting a new business.
Okay, so this is a little different, but like it goes back to a little bit what I said, where sometimes when you open a new business that's from scratch, you make assumptions. So my wife and I did a business. We worked at this large 400,000 square foot center up in Atlanta called ADAC, the Atlanta Decorative Arts Center. It's huge, and they had a little there's a little empty space, and she said, well, I work there, and you know, if you ever need anything, you have to leave the building to get it. I think this place could use like a little sundry shop, you know, like with candy and paper and, you know, things that people need, you know, maybe some cards and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, okay, well, 400,000 square feet, that's, you know, it makes sense. And if we do, $2 a day per person, we'll do $1,000 a day, we'll make all this money. Well, sometimes those assumptions, that's why I talked earlier, I like buying or partnering with existing concepts that have already been around for a few years because they've kind of worked through a lot of the mistakes. So sometimes you go in and you make these assumptions, you know, just like these people say, well, if I can get every person in China to buy my Coke or my product for $1, you know, that's $1 billion in sales. Well, sometimes that on paper it looks good, but when you do real life, it doesn't work. And sometimes it happens like with restaurants as well, is where you have this concept and then all of a sudden later on, like for instance, Famous Dave's, they tried going really big, these blues clubs. Well, blues clubs are really expensive, very, you know, kind of a one-of-a-kind deal. And if you're not in the right location, it just doesn't work at all. And so that's where, so those of you who are trying to do a business, try to go work for a similar business first and learn through their mistakes and positive things. But anytime you try to start a new one, just be very careful because there's always what don't I know. And so try not to do any big leases or spend way too much money, because sometimes you get down the road and then you realize, oh my gosh, we didn't realize this. So it is all tricky. And that's kind of why I only try to buy, even the Outback guys, they tried doing a few concepts themselves and they realized we're better off copying somebody else. So, you know, PDQ was copied, Metro Diner was another, you know, they kind of do, they're on a much higher level than I, but they try to partner with existing successful brands and go forward. So my thing would be, if you're doing a business, maybe try to buy or get involved with a similar business and make it better.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Nick. Sound advice, actually. Okay, who's next? Thank you, Juan. Who's next?
That was Tyler.
Oh, I thought it was Juan who just spoke.
No.
That was me.
Okay, thank you, Tyler. Okay, good. All right, who's next?
I guess I'll do mine then.
All right.
I want to learn number 8, partnership 9 at 11% each.
Yep. So this is, in life, I keep making new mistakes at Little Greek. And so one of my biggest mistakes I've done at Little Greek was my money manager guy from Morgan Stanley said, oh, Nick, you're just so successful before Brady's. I'm going to get on board with Little Greek. I said, oh, that's great. I go, who's going to run it? And so they really, they didn't have an operator. And the key for these businesses, who's in there every day running the business? Well, we found a guy who'd worked for us before from Outback. Okay, well, Scott's going to run it. So they go, okay, well, the partnerships can be 9 of my buddies, and we're all going to put in $30,000, and we'll all own 11% each. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, nobody had enough money in it to make it worth their while. Nobody really wanted to spend the time on it, and there was no consensus about where to go. So as the business struggled, guess what happened? They all look at me, well, you're the franchisor, and ultimately I had to spend a couple $100,000 to buy these knuckleheads out. And so be careful as you do partnerships, because partnerships, like our chairman from Beef said, they're harder than marriages, because in marriage you have love and kids. A partnership at the end of the day is only about money. And they said the worst day of your partnership is when you pull that agreement out of your desk and look at the details, because that means something's wrong. So be very careful about partnerships. Having too many partners can really mess things up, because you have one bad partner can really screw up the whole thing. So that was my mistake there. Was I never should have done a minority partnership with a bunch of people without having anybody really in charge who's responsible on the hook for everything.
And I just want to underline that, Nick. I was a partner in a laundry company one time, and but I was the last partner in. And when the thing was stressed, guess who was the first partner out without his money back?
Exactly.
So it was a good lesson.
Expensive.
All right, who's next? Okay, Seth, do you want to do anything?
Yeah, I was just about to say I'd like to be next, but
We're listening, Seth.
all right. Is it possible to hear about number 7? Growth leads to faster mistakes.
Yeah, that was kind of back on Beef O Bradys. Was we were opening 50 restaurants a year, and then what happens, you don't realize, like for instance, with Beef O Bradys, the first locations were terrible locations, and we go, oh well, we can go anywhere and we'll be successful. Well, let's go for the cheapest rent in the center. And so we were opening like all these restaurants, and then later on we're outpositioned by other brands, and then all Buffalo Wild Wings come in. Excuse me, and then we started struggling. So when you grow real fast, sometimes you're making mistakes, and it's harder. And certainly with real estate, it's impossible to unwind. So with Little Greek, we do 3, 4, 5 restaurants a year. We keep the investment very low. We wait. We don't rush in. If there's no good site, we don't force franchisees like Beef O Bradys. We would force people to open stores. You have 1 year to open, or we keep your money. So we're forcing bad deals. So as you grow companies, some people, they do these rocket ship kind of launches, and they go, and then sometimes they get down, and you've seen it. Sometimes they go Amazon and home run. Other times they bust. They go out of business because they try to grow and it just isn't there. So my preference is to be kind of slow and steady, and really not a lot of debt, very prudent moves. Watch what you're doing. Learn from each successive move. Now, at this point, we could crank up Little Greek because we've had it for now 10 years and we have a pretty good feel for it. But in general, I say be careful early on. Try not to go too fast. We have people like my partner, even with Little Greek. I come on board and she signs 3 leases back to back. I said, what are you doing? You have no infrastructure to handle these stores. You can't, you don't have the people. These aren't good leases. And ultimately, she lost money on all 3 of them because she just, was trying to get out ahead of the growth and, maybe make some extra money. And in hindsight, I said, don't let the franchisee, let's take our time. We'll figure it out. But that's where, sometimes going too fast can really lead to a lot of mistakes. And in companies, you never want to make a mistake that can totally take you out of business. And then the faster you go, the more likely that's to happen.
That's terrific. Thank you, Nick. Before we open it to the rest of the class, we only have 3 minutes left. Damla, I want to see if anybody on YouTube has any comments or questions.
Yeah, I checked it. There is no questions over there.
Okay.
You say there are, Damla?
No questions.
Oh, okay. All right, then we can open to the rest of the class. Does anybody have anything you want to ask Nick about, or do you want me to put the slide back up? Well, I do.
How about if I tell the funny story?
What's that? Yeah, I do. 2 things. One is,
we tell the funny. You want to tell the
funny story? Yeah, but I just want to make a comment first. So I would say that you've heard before. Nick talked about, as a response in COVID, waiving royalties. Do you remember who it was that told us that same thing here a few weeks ago? Anybody remember who it was? That his response to COVID was to immediately waive royalties? No, anybody? Is it ringing a bell? It was Don Fox. Do you remember it from Firehouse Subs? And he said that was the first thing they did, was to save their franchisees. And interesting that Nick, all these minds are thinking brilliantly alike. So that was a good underline of what Don told us a few weeks ago, Nick. So tell us a funny story, Nick.
Well, the one was number 3 was kind of, and by the way, Don Fox is a good friend. We actually talked about all that when that was going on. We're on the Fast Casual Executive Committee with the National Restaurant. Yeah, so I hooked him up with USF actually. So
all right, thank you, Nick.
But he's a great guy. Yeah, great resource. I always call him for advice. So the funny one was number 3 was the Green Lantern, kind of a culture thing. Is we hired this guy at Beef O Bradys, and Beef O Bradys was a family-oriented sports pub. So we're kind of conservative guys. We actually would not allow swearing in the restaurants. If people started, during a game with swearing, we'd say, you can't do that here. This is, we have kids playing there. We had little video games and stuff for kids to play. So one of my operations people was on the road and submits a $300 expense from the Green Lantern restaurant in Louisville, Kentucky. And I go, well, I've been to Louisville a bunch of times, and I've never even heard of the Green Lantern restaurant. So I called up and I called the phone. I said, "Hi there." Lady answers the phone and, "Can I help you?" I go, "Yeah, I'm down here in Tampa and there's a restaurant receipt we're just trying to track down. What kind of food do you serve at this restaurant?" And she starts laughing. And then I guess I hear a bunch of people. She goes, "This guy wants to know what kind of food we serve here." So the guy, I guess, was going to a strip club and tried to run through his expense report. And we fired him. And he was stunned that we would fire him for doing that. And I said, "I'm stunned that you're stunned that we were firing you because you are clearly not built for our company." So when you hire people, look beyond the skill set, but make sure it's a good culture fit, that they will fit in with the rest of your team. And it's hard to kind of get a sense of that just by, interviewing somebody for an hour or two. So be very careful. Hiring people is the trickiest part of any career. Every hire counts. Even the person who's your receptionist, who maybe is just doing the mail, they can screw up the corporate culture in a heartbeat. So be very careful on your hires. Hire slow, fire fast.
That's a great story, Nick. And there's a moral there for all of us too.
Exactly.
Students, let's everybody open your mics up if you would. Open your mics. Unmute yourselves. Okay. Tyler, unmute yourself. There you go. And now let's give Nick a big smiling hand.
Thank you. Thank you. Best wishes, everybody. And then,
Thank you.
yeah, and then Pat, you can share my contact info. If anybody has questions or want to call me or whatever, feel free to do so.
Sure. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
Guys.
And you'll be hearing from me about our board meeting in April.
Great. Sounds good. Let's get Don Fox on the board. Huh?